All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and officially start here. Can I ask the media when you ask a question? Let us know who you are when you ask the question. Our friends from Lincoln Fire and Rescue are not joining us today. They are attending the funeral for Matthew Vonderfeck. He was a fire apparatus operator, and he passed away last Thursday. And so they are attending his funeral today, and we want to send our condolences to his family and all his coworkers. So on that sad note, we will begin with Brad, and just please give us an update on where things are with Nebraska Task Force 1.
I will do, and first I have to echo those sentiments. I was talking to the task force, and I told them I would pass along to everybody that every member of the task force too would like to pass along their condolences for not being in attendance. But wanted to know that their thoughts and prayers were with Matt's family and friends. So with that, I'll get started. I apologize if it sounds like you're getting the situational status report from a plan section chief, but kind of the only way to give you the last 24-hour operational period in an update form and try to skew it towards Nebraska specific. So since yesterday, and Nebraska has been heavily engaged. They were in initial attack mode, we call IA mode, which is no different than if we rolled up on a structure fire in Lincoln. So they're still operating in rescue mode. Yesterday, as are they today. Yesterday's operations, they worked closely with Virginia, California, Ohio, and cumulative between them, they had well over 1,000 rescues and evacuations. Nebraska themselves pulled out 84 companion animals with those and tended to 7 medical episodes of individuals that they were extricating to safety. They also logistically, because the crew is split, the task force is split into logistic ground support, which is supplying them with food, water, boat fuel, and all the things you can think of that that 80 people would need to live and survive in this kind of environment. Logistics folks help them, and they were assisting with the helicopter swing load drops for resupplies for all task force working out of the West staging area, which is the Katy, Texas staging area. And there's up to, at any given time, 9 federal task forces in some capacity staged there. So they were assisting with helicopter drops of additional fuel, boat props, MREs to eat, water, those types of things to exist. The second of the third elements were the non-boat crews. They were assisting with rescues with some of the other boat crews. And they were working with Virginia and Tennessee for a while, for most of the day, actually. And then the boat crew personnel was working downrange with California, and I believe it was Utah for a while before they got retasked to somewhere else. So all crews, all hands on deck, if you will, from about 8 o'clock yesterday until roughly about 10 p.m. when they were starting to tidy their gear back up, get it all replaced, and ready for this morning's operational period. Currently, they were put into operation shortly after 0800 this morning with Virginia and Ohio. They are back working that Katy area that they have been the whole time. Some of the reason being that they are continue to operate in that area is there's 2 dams, the Barker and the Addicts. They're reservoirs. They use them for all the drainage water. So all the water that is now draining, trying to make its way to the ocean from the rain, is backing up in these 2 dams, and it's starting to pool, go over the dam on one side, and they continually let copious amounts of water, but that water runs right through the heart of Houston on its way to Galveston Bay, and then it backs the water up into residential areas. And as of this morning, some of those areas were going as high as 3 feet an hour in vertical lift from the water. So they are continuing to work that area in rescue mode. Some of you may saw on the news, one of the things today that is going to happen is inevitable. the Arkema chemical plant knows they are going to have an explosion that's going to take place because the chemical they have there does not mix with water, and obviously they're going to be taking on water, so that is expected. There's no imminent threat or anything to the task forces. That plant is about 30 miles away. It's just for situation awareness that you may feel the earth vibrate and a boom as that goes off, and it may burn for quite some time. But that is 30 miles away from where our task forces are operating, and so that will not be an issue, just more for self-awareness and education as people may see that on the news. Also, as most of you know, this is a very fluid event, and because of Harvey making its landfall again last night over by Beaumont, Texas, Texas-Louisiana border, they're taking on heavy amounts of rain, and I'm told that's where Hurricane Ike came in a few years back. And so some resources are now being tasked to assist on the east side of Texas, west side of Louisiana, as they're taking now on a brunt of the rainfall and stuff. So, but no movement by Nebraska into that. One thing I do want to add, hopefully I'm going to try, because I know you can easily get tired of me giving you a professional plan section brief from emergency op, is when things slow down and they're not operating an initial attack or rescue, or like being on a fire and stuff, and I don't want to interrupt them, is when they do slow down and transition to other modes of operation that are not near as fast-paced, I will try to see if I can get some of the task force members on the conference call as well, so that they can give you their perspective from the field, and you're not getting it from a command chief or somebody that's kind of running the incident on a global perspective. So I will try to work on that too, but I don't want to interrupt their progress in initial attack mode. They're doing outstanding work. They are all hands on deck, working very cohesive. As you can imagine, they're having some challenges with roads and driving down roads and all that you can think of, but they're being very creative. They've assisted the task force themselves, 2 other task forces that have been stranded on the road from mechanical issues from taking on water. We're no different. We have a vehicle that's taken on some water and maybe out of service, and they have just reconfigured, thinking outside the box, to reconfigure the convoy and continue operating as if it didn't happen. So that's kind of the last 24-hour update, if you will. Pretty much just a status quo, and they just keep doing great work to represent the folks in Nebraska.
Brad, I just want to say we really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. I don't want you to think we don't appreciate all that you've done to help us stay informed on that. If we can get some task force members, that would be great. But again, they're, they have their priorities, so we understand.
So, and I'll work on that. I know the importance. I know families like to hear them. I know everybody likes to hear this is a high profile. It's their stand, and don't feel bad. There was somebody from CNN National that wanted in their boat to film some stuff, and their words to them were, "I'm sorry, you're taking up space. I got people I got to put in here, not you." And so I think they thought they would get in there too, and the guys out in the field handled it. And I told them that the minute I can get you pulled away to do that when things are slowed down and you have some discretionary time, I'll try to make that happen. So, and I apologize for yesterday. There was a helicopter getting ready to land with convoy right over my head on the street. We were setting up the landing zone.
No apologies necessary. Questions, and just a reminder to when you're not asking a question, if you can put your phone on mute, that'll cut down on some of the background noise as well. So go ahead and ask away.
Chief, this is Mike O'Connor with the World Herald. Just want to make sure I've got this right. So since the Nebraska Task Force has arrived in Texas, has the Nebraska Task Force assisted with more than 1,000 rescues since they've been in Texas? Is that right?
I think cumulative since they've arrived in Texas and began operation, they have had, because a lot of crews are mixed together, so I can't say that they specifically, but I know collectively they have had their hand probably approaching 2,000 now. Collectively, the task force is working in my branch yesterday. had over 2,000 just in this branch, and we're just dealing with the city of Houston. There's also all the surrounding counties around Houston, and that's another branch, and they're approaching that same daily total as well. So Nebraska's numbers themselves, they've probably assisted with approaching 2,000.
So you could say at least the Nebraska Task Force has assisted with the rescue of more than 2,000 people since arriving in Texas.
I'd say that's for approaching 2,000.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
And don't forget the 84 animals. They'll get me for that. So
I did want to ask it. Yeah, could you talk about that? So did the Nebraska Task Force? Can you talk to us about that piece of it? Did they also help rescue 84 pets? One of our mission assignments, if you will, directives from FEMA is that we do not leave companion animals behind. So as many of us have pets and we are extremely attached and fond of our pets, as am I, you will not leave a pet behind just to take the owner, because sometimes the owner will not leave a place or leave the pet behind. So they took just yesterday 84 companion animals. So they cumulatively they've taken over 100 companion animals with their owner to safety, just so that there's not animals stranded because we took the owner, or the owner stayed and is put in peril because they don't want to leave the animal. They will take them. So it'd be fair to say the Nebraska Task Force has also rescued, since they got in Texas, more than 100 pets, basically.
Yep, 100 pets. Yep, that'd be fair.
Yeah. Is Michael Conner, is that a challenge itself? I mean, obviously, getting people out is tricky. You know, have they talked a bit about the animals and maybe dogs that don't want to go or are afraid, or do you have any details on that at all?
My experience, and I'm sure it's theirs right now, is most of the animals are afraid too, and they're with their owners, which applies a comfort factor. And so that's really not the case. A lot of the owners will be holding their animals or have the animals created because they want them to go with. And so that soothing factor, it's just getting them to, and we do have veterinary services in place down here through the state of Texas, and Texas A&M's veterinary report comes out. So there's animal care going on at shelters and stuff too as they come in. But it's interesting at times. What I consider a companion animal, I'm not used to snakes being pets and birds and some other stuff, so they do get some oddities every now and again, but they're usually in a controlled environment, and the owner's taking care of them, and they're just transporting them or extricating them from place of peril to safety.
Chief Johnson, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
This rally at the Journal Star. What's the logistics in this hurricane and your responses there? What's the logistics like compared to other hurricanes that the task force has responded to?
It's a heavy lift. Being you can imagine, just there's 1,170 just FEMA task force members. Like there's 28 federal task forces. There's 1,170 of us at theater working, and just to supply them with all the fuel, place to stay, food to eat, water, be coming up on clothing recycle, suits to operate in the water, so they have the proper protective clothing, is a challenge. We at the command level have a whole logistics section. And that section is working with all the military assets from U.S. Coast Guard, the National Guard system, a lot of DOD assets and stuff that will bring in the helicopters to resupply from a potential military base that will airlift the supplies in. The task forces all know the chain of command. For those around the military, it's a military operation. They supply their paperwork. It goes up the chain of command. It gets approved, and all of a sudden they get notified it's going to be delivered via vehicle or overhead through an air wing or something. So a lot of attention is being a federal task force that the federal assets are at our disposal to replenish task forces as needed. One thing to mention, too, even along that lines, the task force also has 25 U.S. marshals assigned to them. They're embedded with them and go everywhere with them, so they have force protection in neighborhoods they go to, watching their equipment while they're working. They're staying in the same staging area, so 25 are just assigned to Nebraska Task Force 1 for any law enforcement needs, force protection, watching over their cache of equipment, especially as people find out that you do have edible food or water and stuff like that, as times may become desperate depending on where you're working and where you're located. So it's not to who that those guys are doing a great job in assisting whenever they can with their skill sets too.
And have they encountered folks that has that law enforcement presence needed to be, I guess, used? Has there been security threats to some of the rescuers?
There's been calls. Not Nebraska Task Force 1 is not. I think meant that they have 25 is a deterrent in itself. Okay. When you have 25 U.S. Marshals, but that's not to say is we work into night ops when it gets dark and some of the other unfortunate things that happen after nightfall and stuff. We have pulled task forces out early just because of safety concerns, and that call's been made by the law enforcement people back to my level that say, hey, this is going on, and then it's just an immediate, we're just going to bring them out. So
is that past experience that you're saying in regard, or is that you guys have called early and come in early?
We called the task force back early yesterday. Not Nebraska Task Force 1, a different one in theater.
What's the are they feeling the fatigue of the last couple of days yet, or is the status?
The words and I'll quote Dan Ripley, who's our logistics, who's working on resupplying and helped with the helo drop yesterday. And Dan Ripley told me in a phone call this morning, they are dog tired, but it's a happy tired. So I am certain that they are getting worked and worked hard. But I think with that is that adrenaline and euphoria that you're doing a great job and you have the means and ability to do great things and save lives and assist people, that I think the tired factor doesn't set in until the 10, 11 o'clock when you're back trying to lay down on your cot and get some rest before you start the next day. So I don't think if I walked up to any of them and said, hey, do you want to go home, I would probably have a mad rush on my hand, or I would have anarchy if I tried to pull them out because they're doing such great work. But yeah, in the words of Dan Ripley with Lincoln Fire, it was they're dog tired but happy tired.
Sure. Any more LFR personnel approved to come down yet with you guys or rotate out?
No. They are assessing that at the federal level in Washington. They did take a survey a couple days back on what agencies might be able to provide if the need came to it, or working on if this became an extended operation. Right now, there's the weather is still uncertain of what Louisiana is doing. We're still in rescue mode in Houston and Harris County. So we haven't even transitioned to a wide area search to search for assistance, searching for lost people and stuff. And all that kind of lays on the authority having jurisdiction with is either the city of Houston and their mayor. Well, they want us to assist and participate, and that kind of dictates the timeline of rotating people out. Do we add more to a task force and those types of things? So a lot of discussion going on, but no determination has been made.
Chief Michael Connor with the World Herald. I know the Nebraska team includes the 5 canine search specialists and their trained dogs. Have they been used, the dogs, the search dogs, and if so, can you talk a little bit about that?
Right now, the search dogs themselves have not been put in during rescue mode in the high water. There's really not a need for the search canines to use. But with that said, the canine handlers have been utilized extensively to assist with the companion animals. They know animals real well. They care for, their own animals, obviously, so they can kind of, as a de facto veterinarian, they soothe and comfort. So they are kind of the turn to when they're not working with their own canine, that a lot of the companion animals can be passed off to if need be and assess and stuff like that. So their role will probably be actually working their canines down the road, but right now I can't safely put a canine in moving floodwaters and swift water like that. So they're kind of back at the booth with the handlers now are being utilized with companion animals in that effort.
Yeah, I understand. And jumping back with the Nebraska Task Force, rescuing the companion animals. Did you say that there's specific instructions from FEMA to, not leave the pets behind, to bring the pets with the people?
Yes, that's a directive that came out, I believe, after Hurricane Katrina and Rita and stuff. To if an individual would like to evacuate and bring their companion animal, that we bring companion animals with, so that we take them all out, so we don't leave people behind that are very attached to animals. They'll say, "I'm not going to go unless you bring my animal. Then I want to take you both out so I can get the individual to safety."
Erin Hassanza here with KETV. Just wondering if you could re-explain how, the rainfall in Houston has dropped a lot, but that doesn't mean, if anything, flooding has gotten a bit worse. Can you just explain how that all works?
So the rain, Houston, as you can imagine, is very flat geographically, so they took on a lot of water in the rain. The rain is subsided at least for a few hours. There was a breakthrough roughly maybe around 12, which is some spotty rain, but not the heavy downpour that we've been experiencing. With that said, all the areas that are around Houston, north of Houston, that have big reservoirs and dams, some retention ponds like we see around to handle the runoff. Now, all of that runoff that is beginning through the small creeks and streams and rivers are all feeding into these big reservoirs as they're part of their flood control plan. Well, no one designed it to handle 50-plus inches of rain at one time, and so as all the drainage comes from the outlying areas down to these reservoirs and dams, and most of them are earthen dams built in the 40s, they can't let the water out fast enough. The water they let out is flooding areas that's going over the top of the dam and then backing up in the dam, almost like a giant irrigation ditch. It just keeps flooding backwards. And so even though the rain has stopped, we still have the drainage of everything that must make its way back to the ocean, if you will. So it's all starting to rain up north and rain around here, and now run its way back through the city of Houston back to Galveston Bay or the ocean, which is leading to a lot of the receding in the roadways, but flooding in other areas and causing water to rise up in areas that may not have had water before or had little water. They're getting the backwash of water from the ponds and reservoirs.
And you said up to 3 feet in some areas?
This morning somewhere, somebody reported this morning it was 3 feet an hour. And I didn't get the exact address, but I did overhear that with the Corps of Engineers.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the food and water situation, for your people, but also just for, regular citizens? Well,
for our folks, we go out. The task force itself is a self-contained city for 72 hours. We need no logistical or help from any outside agency. We bring our own MREs, which are the same thing the military would eat. Meals ready to eat. You have their own little contained cook thing where you can warm them, so it's all just in a package. And so we have 72 hours worth of those for 3 meals a day for everybody, pallets of water. So once we get past the 3 days, then they need resupply, which is what took yesterday. They were resupplying some meals, MREs, to all the task forces so they could have them. When they're working in theater, obviously they're not stopping for lunch. They carry them in their backpacks or in a pickup or van that they're utilizing, and they just kind of eat on the fly when they can. The logistics section is managing all the supply aspect is not unlike a wildland firefighting that's going on in California. They're in the process of trying to order up a camp kitchen, which is basically a giant cook kitchen about the size of a semi or 2 semis that can feed thousands of people at once, just to feed the federal task force workers so that they can get some hot meals running through. To my knowledge, most of the task force has not had a hot meal. For the past 3 days, they've just been on MREs as of every task force, if you will. And so they will try to get that set up, anticipation this is going to be an extended operation. They are staying in a school facility, so they do have showers, bathrooms. They're sleeping indoors on cots in an auditorium or hallway, if you will. So they're not out in the elements and do have running water and all that. It's just there's no kitchen there, and logistics is trying to work through on a national level getting a giant camp kitchen brought in to serve those. Knowing that force protection obviously is around helping that. Citizens are, being encouraged to go to shelters where that is worked by a whole other side of the response or the recovery side. And we sit on the response side, and so not really in tune with how the other side of victims in that, once they go and get bust and stuff, is handled by a different agency. Then we just basically, if you have to take care of our FEMA use, our massive workers that are working that.
Great. So you mentioned that you may have lost some sort of vehicle and that your teams were creative and repurposed it. Has there been any other major loss of equipment or any other specific situations you can think of where you guys had to rework your equipment?
I think multiple task forces have had, you can mention water is filling up underground fuel tanks. And so some of the task force got water in a fuel tank from a fuel pump. And so they were taking off their fuel tank to do that, dump the water out and get better fuel in. Flat tires, obviously, with the debris in the road, that's a constant thing going on, is changing your tires. On the roadway, if you get water maybe into your fan of your engine and it's pinged one vehicle's radiator on a semi. So a lot of those things are being taken care of on the fly mechanically. I think Nebraska Task Force wanted that water into an engine due to high water and stuff, and so they were working through getting that fixed by a mechanic or something downrange they could take care of. But in the meantime, while I was out of service, they just kind of reshuffled how they had things organizationally and went back to work and didn't miss a step. So hope is then that mechanic or shop is getting that repaired and back to full force, but they haven't missed a beat. They just, as firefighters do, they just get creative and continue the mission.
Do you guys have an end date yet, or is the date still the same for when you'll be coming home? Do they know yet?
No idea. They being this is and I couldn't really tell you. I think it's day 5. They are still operating in rescue mode, so nothing definitive has even been discussed at any level.
Any other? Brad, you probably need to get back to work. So, anybody have any final questions?
Chief, just want to make sure that your task force is still based in Katy, Texas, right?
Yes, they are based out of there. Everybody stages. You'll hear me say West Staging Area. I kind of get my lingo and assume you guys know all the verbiage lingo. They are in the West Staging Area, which is there in Katy, Texas. That's where we've set up the big base of operation. They can get resupplied, and then early before the sun's even up, they will start reconfiguring, and then on the overnight, around midnight, 1 o'clock, we will have orders of where they're going, so they know when they get up in the morning, they've already got the direction they need to be heading, and so they will be briefed by their supervisors out there that's kind of giving them the direction to go. And there's, luckily for them, is staying right there in that Katy area versus some of them have another hour to drive. Might be 15 minutes as a crow flies, but it takes them an hour just to get around all the closed waterways to do that. So,
and Brad, everybody's still no injuries yet?
No injuries. I've heard nothing. I've heard everything is great from the doc. Just the normal might have a sore muscle from a lot of walking or being in the water and stuff, but nothing out of the ordinary or none whatsoever, knock on wood. Because we do have 2 physicians associated with the task force from Bryan Hospital, and that deploy with the task force, as well as 4 paramedics from Lincoln Fire. So they're getting great medical attention too as they come, getting daily checks and stuff. So nothing's been reported to me from the task force leaders, which are, Chief Roger Bonine and Captain Brett Davis of Lincoln Fire, are the task force leaders downrange managing the task force, and I keep in contact with them and let them manage their folks, and I just try to assist in managing all the other task forces. One last thing I might add is the photos that you see on the Twitter feed, Instagram, and Facebook. In talking with the External Affairs and the PIO, who works in close proximity to where I'm staged, it's fine. He just asked if there's sensitivity, if there's some that might be underage and stuff like that. Just use generic captains by all means. If you can recognize the Omaha Lincoln Papillion firefighter or whoever's in the picture, feel free to use their name. But the sensitivity to, if it's an underage individual, just use child or whatever you want to go, because it's obviously they can't get a release and it's coming from but feel free to, if you need to utilize some of that social media photos that are going up there, which is coming in and blessed by FEMA, feel free to do so.
Well, Chief, make sure you tell the guys that the team that everybody in Nebraska is closely following, and we're very proud of everything they're doing.
I will tell Chief Bonine and Captain Davis that when I talk to him later today, and I will pass everybody's sentiments, and you guys do as well, to everybody there, because without your efforts back home, supporting with the extra shifts on the fire departments and assisting the civilian population that we take with, wouldn't be possible for us to go downrange and represent Nebraska the way that we're doing. So it's much appreciated on both sides of the fence, absolutely.
Well, keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. I'll stay dry.